So I've been putting out quite a few Star Wars videos recently, and I just wanted to talk about a topic that has come to my mind as of late, and that is basically the Star Wars sequel trilogy is a massive apology to the fans, and it kind of, basically puts fans' emotions first and what fans want first before making a solid 3-act movie without a solid plan. It's so reactionary, the sequel trilogy. And I'm not saying the sequel trilogy is bad. I do like the sequel trilogy, episodes 7, 8, and I'll probably enjoy 9, but we don't know yet because 9 isn't out. But, for the most part, I have enjoyed Disney, Star Wars, and the sequel trilogy, but I just wanted to talk about how the sequel trilogy is so reactionary, man, and I'll give you a few examples of that. So, in 2012, Disney bought out Star Wars from George Lucas, and in 2015 The Force Awakens came out, and basically The Force Awakens' goal was to be an homage to A New Hope and these, original trilogy, and it's not, a thought-provoking criticism that it was a ripoff of A New Hope, because that's what they were intending, because the prequels were so bad and so poorly received among, Star Wars fans that they wanted to give fans, basically an homage to the original trilogy. So the whole entire reason why The Force Awakens is the way that it is, well, one, J.J. Abrams loves A New Hope, but also it's a reaction to the prequels, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing necessarily, but it is where basically the reactionary Star Wars films, start. And with The Last Jedi, a criticism, as I said, of The Force Awakens was it was too much like A New Hope, and it was too much like, what we've seen before. So Rian Johnson, he made The Last Jedi subvert our expectations, and it's different. And I do agree with Geekdom 101, a friend of mine, go check him out, Geekdom 101. It was actually on his World of Geekdom channel that he talked about how The Last Jedi, it being bold and, innovative for the Star Wars franchise, I mean, it really isn't, and I feel like that's kind of a point, and the magnitude of how much people say, The Last Jedi is so different and so bold is a little bit strong, and it's a little too blown up, because it really isn't that different. I mean, it does take a few new directions with the character development, but it's still Jedi versus the Sith. Like, it's no different than any other Star Wars movie. It just has a lot of twists and it subverts our expectations, but it doesn't go in a brand new direction. And I do agree with Geekdom, even though he hates the movie. I really like the movie, but that's either here nor there. Anyway, The Last Jedi, it was so different because, and it was subverting our expectations because of The Force Awakens. It's a reactionary thing. Like, The Last Jedi exists the way that it does for the most part. I mean, Rian Johnson would have made a similar story, but even still, it was a reactionary film because, The Force Awakens, it harkened back to the original trilogy, so with The Last Jedi, they basically, subverted our expectations, and some people loved it, some people hated it, but that's really not what the topic is here. Whatever. Anyway. But yeah, it subverted our expectations. So it's such a reactionary Star Wars film. So is The Force Awakens. And with The Rise of Skywalker, people were divisive about The Last Jedi. Some people loved it, some people hated it. So with The Rise of Skywalker, Episode 9, they are bringing back Palpatine in some capacity. And now, I don't think he's the main villain, and I'll talk about that in another video. Maybe I'll bring Danny on for that discussion, who knows. But they're bringing Palpatine back in some shape or form, and it's harkening back to The Force Awakens, and it seems like a very fan-driven movie. Again, very reactionary to the polarizing reception of The Last Jedi. And I feel like the Rise of Skywalker will retcon some things about The Last Jedi and keep things intact about The Last Jedi and what it did for the Star Wars franchise moving forward, because you know, it's a very divisive film. Some people love it, some people hate it, so you don't want to piss off either side. So the Rise of Skywalker does have a difficult job, but it's still reactionary how they're bringing back the Emperor, because it's similar, it's familiar territory, and The Last Jedi kind of, you know, it was a mess in terms of fan feedback, you know what I mean? So it's just interesting, like, each film is an apology for, you know, the other, you know, it's very interesting how that works, and it kind of plays as a detriment, to be honest, because, and I'll tell you why, it's because instead of making a, you know, 3-act structure, you know, like, instead of making a 3-act story with, you know, The Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker just being one complete story with one sort of writer, or like at least a collaboration of writers all the way through, instead of passing the baton over to a completely different writer and then handing it back to the same writer that made the first film, you know, it instead goes for, you know, oh shit, like, people reacted like this with The Force Awakens, so let's try to do this with The Last Jedi, but oh wait, people reacted like this to The Last Jedi, so let's try to reel it back a bit with The Rise of Skywalker. You see what I mean? It's so apologetic, and it's so, like, reactionary, and I don't know if I like that. I mean, I think the movies are good, but I just feel like that practice of, oh shit, we need to cater to people and we need to apologize for this mistake because people didn't like this. I feel like that's a wrong way about, you know, getting films made, you know what I mean? It should just be one story, and I feel like that's just a core fundamental issue with the sequel trilogy in general. It should have had one flowing narrative arc instead of passing the baton over to another writer completely, especially since Rian Johnson started writing the script, I believe, when The Force Awakens finished shooting. I believe it wasn't even out yet. I believe, you know, somewhere around there. But anyway, still, it should have just been one flowing narrative with one, or, you know, even Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams, you know, collaborating. I feel like that would have been cool, you know, one flowing story arc, you know, 3 movies made by 2 writers, you know, that would be pretty cool instead of passing the baton. It just doesn't really work, and it's so weird that Star Wars is being treated like that, and it's weird. I like the films, but it's just a weird way of going about making, you know, a trilogy, you know what I mean? The sequel trilogy of the Star Wars fucking franchise, man. Like, it's a weird way of going about it, this reactionary kind of apologetic way of making a film, these 3 films. It's so weird. So hopefully The Rise of Skywalker kind of just does its own thing, and, you know, hopefully it doesn't cater to, you know, anyone, really. I don't want it to be a massive apology, and that's what the sequel trilogy is, and it's so weird. I'm not saying it's bad, but I'm just saying it's a weird, you know, way of going about it, and it shouldn't happen. You know, I mean, I'm not saying the films are bad, I'm just saying this shouldn't happen. It shouldn't be a massive apology. It should just be its own story, and instead it's just so blatant that they're trying to sort of, you know, get everyone on board and basically apologize and make people forget about the prior film, you know, that came out, you know, whether that be the Star Wars prequels or, you know, Force Awakens, Last Jedi, whatever. They're trying to make people forget about the shortcomings or the criticisms of the previous film, and it's so weird to me. But anyway, what do you guys think about the apologetic nature, I guess, about the Star Wars sequel trilogy? Do you like the sequel trilogy? Do you like the way that The Rise of Skywalker is heading, with Palpatine coming back, you know, supposedly? I don't think he'll have as much of a major role as people think. He's definitely going to not be the main bad guy, but I feel like the guy who's going to be the main villain has close ties to Palpatine. But again, I'll talk about that later, probably with Danny or someone else. I really don't know at this point. But anyway, that's gonna do it for me. Please make sure to rate, comment, and subscribe. What do you feel like what do you think about the whole Star Wars sequel trilogy, you know, and also how weird the production is, because it's so weird, because even with, you know, like the MCU, now the MCU is much, you know, larger in scope, you know, they put out like 3 movies a year or whatever. At least they have a core plan, you know, with all the movies, and it's not just like, you know, going blind into this massive franchise. Anyway, that's gonna do it for me. Please make sure to rate, comment, and subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.